And I thought, what about the tree of life?
Yeah.
And as soon as I said that in my mind, the tree of life, out of the ocean, like, where the waves break, this beautiful pine tree just appeared. And it was like this luminous, the bark was like a light, very light green, not brown. And I went over and I looked at the patterns of the bark, and I recognized this is a tall, spindly pine tree. And I was thinking the tree of life, and I thought, I just created that.
Wow. Did you eat an apple from it?
There was no apples.
Hi, everybody. It's your girl E, and this is another episode of the Vision Rebirth podcast. This podcast features life-changing stories of NDEs, divine dreams, meditations, and encounters with higher beings. And today we have a special guest. She's the author of the paranormal romance mystery book series, The Near-Death Saga, that's inspired by her own near-death experience. We have Lura Ketchledge. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm really thrilled to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
For sure. I'm definitely excited to get into your story. So I guess before we get into it, I'm curious to what was your belief system before your near-death experience? Like, did you believe in God? Where were you at with that?
Well, I was born and brought up in a Presbyterian family. We went to church a lot. I sang in the choir. I went to Bible school, church camp. We were very heavily involved in the Presbyterian faith. But I have to say, I don't believe I was indoctrinated. I always had my doubts. Even as a child, I didn't take the Bible literally. I always thought it was a story of explanation. So I believed in God. I believed in right and wrong, and had Judeo-Christian upbringing. But it wasn't drummed into my head, and I didn't come from a Bible thumping family. So that was
Yeah.
to my advantage later on.
Gotcha. So you basically just had like just the basic belief, hey, we go to church and this is right from wrong, don't murder people, don't steal. That that type of
Serial killer, that sort of thing.
for sure. Now, with your experience, you were young. You were young, living life, just a regular teenager, and you happened to have a horse accident. Can you just kind of explain that horse accident and sort of how that happened, and then you like what the situation around you getting launched off the horse was?
Well, this is kind of interesting, but also I'm going to sound very klutzy. Okay. I lived, breathed, loved horses a lot, as a lot of little girls, and got to ride very seldom. But let me preface this. When I was 12 years old, I went to a stable, got on a horse I didn't know that was above my abilities. The horse took off with me, hit the highway, and flipped in the air and fell and
Sheesh.
crushed me. But just before the horse landed on top of me, I was 12 years old. I was a little kid. I left my body and I was watching as a spectator. What a
Interesting.
shock. I'm 12 years old. I left my body. I was watching the accident as a spectator. At the very last minute, I slingshot back into my body, put my arms out like this so my face didn't hit the pavement before the horse landed on top of me, which saved my life.
Wow.
But that was an out of body experience, something I really couldn't express to anybody. But the strange thing is, it felt very natural. It was such a horrific accident that I went into shock afterwards, and I went to the hospital and all those things, and I recovered. So a few years later, of course, I'm back on another horse.
Back on a horse. I'm surprised by that. I don't think I would have got back on a horse after that.
This is terrible. This time I knew better. I was 19, and when you're 19, you think nothing can happen to you, and you know it all.
Yeah.
Anyways, so one day I went out and I rented a horse for the afternoon. And as I was riding back to the stable, I just had the great idea to race these two other gentlemen that I met on the trail, and it wasn't my brightest moment. So basically, the horse really took off, stumbled, and I knew I was going to get clobbered.
Jeez.
I knew it. But just before, as I was getting catapulted out of the saddle, I left my body. I did not get slingshot back in. I left my body. I never hit the ground, thankfully, because it was pretty bad. It was face first. And I had what people say a classic near-death experience. But I was 19. This was 1979, before any of the internet or any of the talk about near-death experience. So it was an absolute total shock. Erica, my whole core belief system turned upside down.
I bet.
Everything that I thought made sense didn't make sense. I was in, it was a world that is almost inexpressible. It was the best thing that ever could have happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened into my entire life, and I'm thankful for it. I just wish the injuries afterwards weren't so.
Well, how does it feel to not be in your body? Like, how does that feel?
It's amazing how quickly, when you shed your physical body, it feels natural.
You said it feels what?
Natural. You feel wonderful, in fact. Light. I still felt like me, like arms, legs, head, hair, all that kind of stuff. So I still felt like me, but I was going down this tunnel that was velvet smooth at a very high rate of speed. And I had a roller coaster of emotions because, number one, I knew I was dead. I was thinking logically because I was 19. I wasn't a 12-year-old anymore. I knew I was dead. And the grief I felt because I had just started to live. I mean, I had my first apartment. I had a cool job.
Wow. At 19?
Yeah. I had a cool job working in a really hot nightclub. I had 2 boyfriends that I liked and was madly in love with at the same time. I traveled in a very, very fast crowd with much older people. I can say that now because I'm older, but I was the pretty girl. So a lot of doors are open to you when you're the pretty girl. And, you know, having that freedom, your own car, your own apartment, your own money, it was just wonderful. And I just begun to live and I couldn't believe it was over. It's like you just wake up and now the life is just snatched from you. So it was anguish I felt at.
So you knew that you were dead, and you weren't scared?
I was more in remorse and grieving that I left my life than anything. Imagine this. Let's say you're sleeping in bed and you're in the Midwest and it's, 2 a.m. and someone throws you into the Pacific Ocean. It was that abrupt.
So it's not even, you don't even have time really to be scared.
You didn't even get prepared for the accident. I didn't get prepared for anything. So I had this out of body and going to this destination beyond my control. But the wonderful thing is my grandfather was there.
And did he look like how you remembered him, or did he look like, like a young man and you just knew? Or
no, he looked like him, like he did before the cancer got him. Before it overtook him. He looked like he did, but it's hard for me to talk. Every time I do a show, I kind of prepare myself because when I talk about my grandfather, my whole body just crumbles and I want to cry. But I don't want to do that because I'll miss the point of the whole event. But the wonderful thing is he loved me. He understood me. He accepted me. There was no judgment. There was no criticism. This was a person in my life that was wonderful.
So do you think that's why it was him? Because why was it him and not like somebody else in your family?
At 19, I didn't know that many people that had died at the time. At the time, a lot of my family was still alive, but it was best seeing him. It was wonderful to know that he still existed, that there was no cancer, there was no terrible, awful pain. But it's, just think, if somebody you love that has died and had been gone for years walked into the room and you see him for that first time, that, taking your breath away, and the
Yeah.
excitement of it, it was just indescribable. But when you're dead, your emotions are more intensified.
Hmm.
Colors are brighter. Sound is crisper. Everything is 10 times what it is here. There's no mute button. There's no dimming. So it was wonderful to see him. And then, there were so many places I was taken to and guided to, and I lost sight of him. I think he was behind me, but I was being guided through these things, these lessons.
Well,
And
I have a question about the tunnel, because a
yeah,
lot of people mention that tunnel, and
yeah.
I know for you, you said at that tunnel there was no light at the end
Well, there
at
was
first.
later. There was later.
Okay, but it
But it,
wasn't at first. You
but
had
it,
to go to it.
it was like all of a sudden I left the horse and I was in the tunnel. There was
Okay.
no entrance. I mean, it was like that. It was like there was tunnel and I was moving. So I was out of my body in this and going into this other dimension.
Mm. And then when you reached the light part, that's when you met your grandfather,
Yeah.
and he sort of guided you to the
He,
different.
he was there and there was a reunion, but then I was being guided not by him, by a force, to these like other compartments or other dimensions. I mean, I can tell you what they were later on, but at the time I really didn't know what was going on. I was just shell shocked. Later on I
So
put it together better.
yeah, so what places did you go, and honestly, how did you get there? Like, in terms of, and not how did you get there in terms of like physically, but it's like, I know at one point you asked a question about like the tree of life, and then all of a sudden you were shown the tree of life. Like, how was
Yeah.
that?
Well, let me just kind of tell you something. Um, Physical reality is like here. Okay, there's physical reality, a little space. We're in physical reality right now. There are different dimensions that go out and out and out and out, and each is thinner and more thought responsive.
Mm,
Okay, but it takes place in the same area, like where physical reality is. Think of that there's layers or dimensions or rings that
hmm.
just go out further and further, but in the same space. So we're occupying space. You and I are occupying space, but in the same space, there's other dimensions. That is something I had a hard time wrapping my brain around.
Is it kind of like how, on Earth it's like different atmospheres? So it's like we in the sky, but then all of a sudden it's like the like above, like the firmament, and then you're in space, and like, is it kind of like that where it's
I
like
think so.
different
Yeah,
textures?
that's a very smart analysis. Yeah, yeah. It's very hard to describe. There's an author, William Buellman, and he really nails it. If somebody should go read his book that is interested, he can explain it a lot better than I can. I can tell you what I went through and what I learned, but I can't tell you uh, I can't draw you the roadmap very
For
well.
sure. So, and then you also had a life review.
That was
Um,
pleasant.
you said it wasn't pleasant. Can you talk about like how your life review sort of showed you how you should be living life?
Well, basically, I was whisked into a life review, like whisked. And you see these interactions with people. Let's just make up something. I was mean to a little friend or something,
Yeah.
or said something really hurtful to another kid. Not a big crime, not a big deal. No one would think a whole lot of it, but it is a big deal there. You
Hmm.
feel the results of your actions in the eyes and the soul of the person that you did it to.
Hmm.
So you don't get away with anything. Let me put it that way. The biggest lesson I learned is like, don't do any harm. I'm not this enlightened person at all, but I just know that do the minimal damage, through life to other people that you can. you got to stick up for yourself, but you don't victimize or hurt other people. There's a very good reason, because how you treat others, let's say you show somebody kindness, you're fair, you're clear, you're kind. That is what is really holds the most value: generosity
Hmm.
and kindness.
Hmm.
Like to help somebody. Or you can put it another way: don't be mean to anybody, because when you die, you're going to feel exactly the results of your actions through the other person. So I saw some things that weren't too great about myself. I didn't like it, but I was also seeing it as a teenager, not as an adult that could, handle it emotionally. So I saw some things I did were good. I saw some things I did were bad. One time when I saved this kitten from getting hit by a car, risked
Wow.
my own life getting out of a car to get a kitten on the side of the road. That was a biggie. I had forgotten about it. So you really just get a feeling of the ultimate responsibility that you hold. How you treat other people, how you treat animals is almost
Hmm.
as important as you treat other people. And it wasn't like a punishment. Oh, you've been bad and you made this person feel bad, so this is how it is. It was an understanding of your actions. So it's not like a punishment. But let's say you're a bad person, Erica, like you're some greedy president in some weird, you know, country, and you start a war and get a lot of people killed and stuff for money or power, or a land grabber.
Like Hitler.
Well, somebody like that would feel every single person that he affected,
Hmm.
how they hurt. I would that no, I would say that's a pretty good version of hell. But anyways, my own experience, I can't really pontificate on others. My own experience was I didn't like some of the things I saw about myself. I really didn't. Did I do
Hmm.
better when I came back? A little bit, but not necessarily great. Didn't make me like, superwoman or anything, but I got a general understanding. So the message was is the responsibility that you carry
Hmm.
in your life. So that was a biggie. Would you like to hear another one?
Yeah, I actually want to ask you a question about that because it almost is like we come here, right? And we don't remember any of that, any of like whatever we were before we
Yeah,
came here. And it's like we're expected to know, oh, don't not necessarily, of course, you know not to be mean, of course, but
right.
it's just like you're expected to have this responsibility. Like, why is that? Like, why isn't it something that we come and remember? So we know, oh, we have this big responsibility.
Well, basically, I know this sounds terrible, but when we come into Earth, it's sort of like there's just carnage here. People doing awful things. Just watch
Right.
the news. I mean, people doing horrible things to each other, and the worst of humanity is out there, and then sometimes the best. But think about it: for an inexperienced soul coming into physical reality is an exquisite teaching machine. It's a
Hmm.
mechanism that, it's a school. It's basically a school where we learn all these lessons. So in your life, in your various lives, you've been the victim, the villain, the hero, the passive person, the instigator. We've all played these different roles. Why? In order to learn these really big lessons. And I mean, uh, it's a very brutal world out here, and by design, it's a predatory world by design in order for us to
Hmm.
learn lessons. I don't like how it works. I don't like the setup.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. What is the point of that?
I'm not happy about it. There's things I found in my near-death experience where I was a little disenchanted, shall we say.
Right.
I want to reshuffle the deck. I want to come back, blah, 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 blah. But I got a general idea what happens after you die. I was shown a lot of lessons. Had a tremendously hard time processing. It took me years, but I didn't like the life review.
You didn't like yours.
I
Okay.
don't like them in general. I mean, I'm not one of these people. Oh, it made me a better person. Not really. It made me
Yeah.
more. I was able to comprehend it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you talk about lives and the different lives because you know this wasn't your first life. You found out like you've been here dozens of times.
I must have failed humanity 101 a lot, a lot. Okay, excuse me.
what
The only
what was your
that
what was your past life that you were just like, wow, I can't
well,
believe that I used to be this.
so, anyways, after I experienced this, I went into another. I was whisked into another place. Okay,
Yeah.
I looked to the side, and I believe it was planet Earth or some sort of planet I saw in the distance. And my first thought wasn't like, "Oh, this is exquisite." Oh, I hate heights. And I thought, why aren't I? Why aren't I? I'm not afraid. I can't stand heights. I don't even do well on a ladder. You know.
Hmm. Right.
So I was taken to this big cathedral or hall, and there were walls, but the walls were white and fluffy. And there was a line of souls to my right. There was a line to my left. On my left, there were all these souls in a line that were female. On my right, they were male. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting the message somebody's guiding me or has their hands on my shoulders. I'm still me. And, I'm thinking, why isn't there a floor? Well, there has to be floor. You think about dumb things. But, uh, and then these were your past lives. And I
Hmm.
thought there had to be 50, maybe 75 female on the one side. And then on the male, and then the male on the other, the same number. I could never imagine that I'd ever been a man. Ew, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like that. So what I did is I went over to touch one, and it was like this middle-aged, unattractive white guy.
Wow.
And I thought, but I couldn't communicate. I couldn't get anything. I didn't feel any connection. I didn't like get to think, oh, what was it like? And I thought to myself, there's all these souls. I've done this a lot. I must not have done it well if I'm to keep coming back.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I felt sad. All the knowledge that I had acquired during all these lifetimes, I wish I had now. All that
Hmm.
knowledge,
Yeah.
all the trade skills, the language,
Yeah.
the history, the relationships, the talents, all those things I couldn't access. And then I went over and touched a female, and she looked like this really mean lunch lady I had in like second grade. I mean, one too pretty, and I just was like, ugh, I don't like this too much. I wasn't real happy about it. I was grateful for the opportunity to realize that I'd done this before because I did not believe in reincarnation.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think now it's the ultimate soul recycle program. Oh, what can I
Right.
say? How could you ever, Erica, think about this? How could you ever learn all the lessons that humanity has in one lifetime?
Yeah, you can't do it. Yeah, because you're only from one perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So I wasn't real. I was in awe of the thing, but as soon as I kind of figured it out, I was whisked off to the next place. I did not like that.
Hmm.
I didn't have time to ask questions. Then I was whisked off to the next place, and you would have said that you were in heaven when you got there. Really?
That's how it would look like. It was just like, was it golden? What
No,
they say, heaven is
I
golden.
was standing on this beautiful beach, and I grew up in a
Oh,
beach town. This beautiful ocean and these gorgeous rocks, and I realized in the rocks, in the rock foundation, were carved. There were windows, and they looked very, very real, like architecture. And someone had carved out and put windows. There was dwellings in these beautiful rocks. And I, thought, what a beautiful view of the ocean. Is this heaven? And I thought, no, I don't think this is heaven. I don't see any people. And then I was thinking about religion. And I thought, what about the tree of life?
yeah.
And as soon as I said that in my mind, the tree of life, out of the ocean, like, where the waves break, this beautiful pine tree just appeared. and it was like this luminous. The bark was like a light, very light green, not brown. And I went
Mm.
over and I looked at the patterns of the bark, and I know I recognized this is a tall, spindly pine tree. And I was thinking the tree of life, and I thought I just created that.
Wow. Did you eat an apple from it?
There was no apples. The pine tree. There was no cones either. But it was beautiful, and I knew it was thought responsive. Seeing
Mm.
this tree of life, and I knew that there were people around, but I didn't get to stay.
It seems like you were just getting glimpses. It was just like, oh, you can get a little of this, little of that, little of this.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, take, I'm the person. If I died, and there was a room that said heaven, and there was a room say lecture on heaven, I'd go to the lecture first before I went to heaven. That's just who I am.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
And I had
Directions.
a natural curiosity. Now, I did not have any fear as this was going on. I did not have
Yeah.
any fear when it was the showing, the past life thing. There was no fear in me at all.
It was just all
Curiosity,
curiosity. Interesting.
curiosity.
Did
A
you see
little.
any other beings or angels or anything like that?
No, I haven't seen the angels. I don't even know if angels. I think angels are just souls that were confusing. But then I had the whoosh, and then I was moving, and then it was wonderful. That's when I went to source,
Mm.
and
And that's God, right?
yeah, well, that's the ultimate place to go. Okay, you swoosh there, and then I lost the feeling of having a body. I felt like I was a point of consciousness at that point. So there was a
Mm.
difference. I felt like a point of consciousness.
So like that's just like energy. Like you didn't even feel like your hand. Like before you said you felt like you said you still had like your body and was functioning like your body. So at this point you were just like energy, like the
Yes.
orb that people describe
Yep.
maybe.
Yep. Yep. But I
Huh.
had, boy, was my vision better. So I'm just whooshed into this thing, and it's like you're floating in a sea of love, and you're bursting through clouds, and there's a
Wow.
sun above, but without a sun. Okay. There's no real sun, but there's a brightness above. And I wanted for nothing.
Hmm.
I wanted for nothing. I was totally at peace, floating in a sea of love. There were all these souls I could feel around me.
Hmm.
And I could hear music floating in random waves. This beautiful, melodic, inexpressible music. And I was at your final destination. So it was beautiful, and it didn't last long, but I still grieve it because it's just so wonderful. I think that the souls around me were versions of myself in past lives.
Mm.
I believe I'm skipping ahead. When your soul enters into physical reality to be born into this world, it fractures, and you break into all these personalities and live different lives. Then there's an uplift over time where you go back to the source, all the
Hmm.
personalities, versions of you. And that's what I did.
I have a question about your past lives too. Like, were all your past lives human? Like, were they all, they all
As
were
far
on
as I
Earth?
can comprehend, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there was more. I mean, it could be more in other planets and other realities. Who knows? I don't know how it works.
Wow.
I didn't get the instruction book.
Now, why didn't you stay or negotiate your stay or cuz
I didn't have the critical thought
okay.
because I was floating in a sea of love and just absorbing it. and it was bliss. And then it was over. And I don't know why. Probably because I was perhaps getting CPR on my body at the time. I don't
Ah,
know.
okay. Okay. It's
But it was
funny because
over.
others,
And
uh,
I came back to where my grandfather was, and I was closer to physical reality. And it was like this mauve color background. And my grandfather, from being clear, was going to less clear visually. And knowing that I had to come back and being told I had to come back. And then what happened was I'm standing there and I'm putting up a pretty good argument. There were so many more lessons that I learned. So I said to my grandfather, I said, this has been so long because there was much more that I learned. And it started escaping my mind. It was being erased or taken away from me. Great epiphanies and lessons and explanations were just getting washed right out of my brain. And it was a horrible feeling because I wanted to hold on to these, this lesson, this education. I was losing all of these things. There was so much more that happened that was getting taken away, and there was anguish and loss with that. And I couldn't stop it. I had no choice. All of these things I really didn't have any choice about anything. And my grandfather, leaving my grandfather was awful, and I was getting sucked backwards into that tunnel. And
and
I wanted
did
to
your
stop.
grandfather say goodbye? Like, was it like, hey, well, you have to go back now, you know,
I had
goodbye?
to
Or
go back. He was becoming less clear, more foggy, and then he was becoming in the distance.
hmm,
I was losing him, and I wasn't happy about anything. I wasn't feeling grateful. I was feeling an inexpressible agitation. And
hmm.
then I came back into my body with this thud, and I was hurt. My nose was broken. My finger was broken. Everything was bruised, banged up. My chest hurt.
Where were
Um,
you at when you came back? Were you still on the ground, or were you in the hospital?
I was in Centerville, Virginia, um, at this riding place. I was in the field, but somebody had brought down a car. There were other people there. The
Okay.
barn manager was there. Everybody was very concerned. And I have to say, I wasn't exactly nice when I came back. I was really upset. And I looked around the field because, and I just said to myself, this is not reality. I shouldn't be here.
Hmm.
So I was very distraught because I'd left my grandfather. I'd had these epiphanies. All of this stuff was getting taken out of my mind, which was really, I would say, painful,
Hmm.
emotionally and physically. And my head hurt. I had hard hat, a helmet on, and I still had a massive concussion.
Right.
So the on my way to the hospital, I passed out again.
Hmm.
Get to the hospital. My poor mother's there. She worked at Fairfax Hospital. Everybody was hovering around me, and I was just, I just, yeah, I just was shaken up, very
Now,
shaken up.
you were 19 when you experienced this, and you said this was in the
Yeah,
70s. And so you didn't
yeah,
like
70.
this didn't change like your approach to life in any way? Like you didn't like
Oh my God. My core belief system evaporated with my near death experience. Why? I didn't see Jesus or have a religious epiphany. I had a spiritual awakening, but I did not have a religious epiphany. And as I was sitting upstairs in my mom's room, they had to, what happened in the hospital was everything was, very serious until I told the doctor, tried to tell the doctor about my near death experience, tried to tell him what had happened, and he asked me what drugs I was taking, and all of the compassion and all of the judgment and all of the not nice stuff in him came out. He was
yeah.
not very nice to me. And my mother said, listen, she's not on drugs. She had a head injury.
Yeah.
She stopped breathing. And he was not nice. And back recuperating at my mom's house, I was upstairs, I got to tell you this, and all of my religious training gone. I had the epiphany within myself. Now you can, this was my reality.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought to myself, all organized religion's man-made, based
Hmm.
on good stuff, but I didn't see any of it. It just evaporated for me.
Yeah.
I have
Okay.
Judeo-Christian beliefs, but at my organized religion, no, it's gone.
Did you come back with any like spiritual gifts?
Well, that happened a little bit later, and that was a pretty much sent me into therapy.
Why did it
I
send
didn't
you to
know
therapy?
I didn't know what to do. After I had the near death experience, I went to a therapist and I tried to tell her. I said, I saw my grandfather and this happened. She said, "Are you, having a pity party because you broke your nose and you got hurt?" And I said,
Mm,
"No, this is what happened." And she said, "Oh, you had a dream. You had a dream and blah blah blah." I said, "You know what? I don't think you dream when you're unconscious." And I tried to talk to her, but she shamed me. When she shamed me, I shut down. I didn't
mm,
want to tell anybody. I didn't want to be labeled a wackadoo. I didn't want to share this stuff with anybody. I became tight-lipped. I held it in, and that was not good for me.
mm.
It made me kind of angry inside.
Yeah. Well, what was like the spiritual gifts that you had that you were like suppressing?
Well, I knew that when you died, your body, you continued, the soul continues. I didn't have any problem with that. I always, I thought that was pretty nice to know for sure. I wasn't a believer. It was factual. I'm a just the facts man, type of person.
Yeah.
I didn't realize when I was 19, I was a wild child. It was the 70s. It was very, very different. And
Right.
I wanted to
Right.
have a good time. I wanted to be a model. I wanted to, do pageants and, I just, be a good time Charlie. That's all I cared about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this made me change.
Did you experiment with like psychedelics and try to get that feeling back or go? No.
No, the strange thing about me always, I drink about 4 glasses of wine a year.
Oh,
That's
okay.
about all I
Okay.
have. I have never been into alcohol. I don't like recreational drugs. It's not a fun experience, therefore I don't do it. Prescription drugs, I don't have the chemical makeup that gets enjoyment out of an altered state. I've just always been that way. I had a sister who was the same way. We never did the drugs or the alcohol or anything.
Bless you. So what brought the book about? Oh, I'm sorry.
One more. Sorry. Um, so I had this experience, and let me just preface this. You know, I didn't realize that there were after effects after a near death experience. Nobody
Hmm.
prepared me for it. There was no manual. There was no discussion. There
You
wasn't
need.
any place in the library we could look it up.
Yeah.
So I did go to the library. I couldn't find anything about that except head injuries and delusions and crap. So, so I had a friend of mine that was killed in an accident, and I saw that person afterwards, which got me very, very scared and very upset.
You saw them
And
after they died.
yeah,
Okay.
that was the after effects
Okay.
of near death experience.
Sixth sense.
I think I have a theory that a sixth sense happens. Um, I don't believe, okay, everybody's got a pinch of psychic. No human being has a full cup. But when you have a near death experience, I think some people bring an ability back, a limited ability. Mine has been always random. It comes in sideways. I have no control. But I saw a friend, and then later on, I saw a relative that was elderly that passed away and came into the room. And I got up and ran like a mental patient, out of the room, scared. I
So
felt
you
very
saw
bad.
them. You saw them in your waking life just walk into the room. Did they say anything to you?
No, because I got up and ran.
Okay.
I'm not this brave. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sitting up in bed. Thank God I had on a nightgown because I'd have ran back naked out down the hall, and there was family was home. I I got up and I just started screaming, somebody's dead in the family, somebody's dead in the family. They just came to see me, blah blah blah. So I called. I was down in Florida. I was called my sister the next day. I said, "Who died?" And my poor Evelyn had died and the day before, and I feel guilty. And Evelyn, I am so sorry I ran away from you, because
Hmm.
she was the sweetest woman in the world. But yeah, there's some funny things that happened. After that, I had some things that happened that just didn't add up. So I went to a therapist at 25, and luckily I walked into the right door to the right therapist. And I just told her everything that had happened. And she said, "Well, it's the first time I heard it. She said, I believe you've had a near death experience. Read Robert Monroe's books. It'll give you a lot of explanation. You're not the first person who's talked about this. You're not crazy. You don't need an antidepressant. You just need to get an understanding." Once I got that and read his books, oh, okay, it made sense. And then I didn't panic when these things would happen in the future, and they certainly do. Um, I came to grips with it. It's just, there's an overlapping between physical and non physical reality, and you just got to peek in the window once in a while. That's all.
Gotcha. So sometimes basically so your spiritual gift is sometimes you have the ability to see the unseen, essentially.
Yeah, but later on I found out, I told my grandmother, that I saw her husband, and she was very, very open to it and very, very kind about it. And we talked in great length because I love my grandmother, and I told her everything.
Yeah.
And she said, this is the kicker. I wish I'd known it sooner. She goes, "Well, I believe you're just like my mother." And I said, "What?" And she said, "My mother had the gift. My great
Hmm.
my great grandmother, Catherine Marston." And then I found out she told me all these family stories about Catherine and about it coming through the George line.
Hmm.
Her last name was George, through the George family and different uncles. And then I talked to this one uncle that I absolutely loved and adored, and he has the same abilities. So I think it was a perfect storm of something that passes through my grandmother's people and then having the near death experience. Had
And
I not
so
had the accident, yeah.
so did the book come along because did you talk to anybody on that other side? Like did you get over the fear of it at any point and like have a conversation with someone
Oh
that
yeah, I mean, like by the time I was 25, these things had been happening to me off and on. I lost all the fear about it. It was fine. It became just part of my life. Um, like being right-handed, it just was not a big thing. I didn't talk about it to people because I didn't want to be uh, thought of, somebody that believes in UFOs, or the dog down the streets telling him a freaking message. Uh,
right.
I, you know, Nothing like that. Listen, if I had real psychic abilities, I would be in Las Vegas making money right now.
I
I wouldn't be
feel
talking to
that.
you.
What
I would be capitalizing on it. It's just not possible. But what
right.
was nice that I did talk to, I had an uncle who had the same abilities as me. He was born that way. He also, we were sort of connected. When I was in the hospital having a very serious surgery, uh, he had called and left a message with my mother. He was very concerned about me. He had an intuition. And my late sister had, when we got talking, she had some ability, just
Hmm.
little abilities. But it helped me to go to the therapist. But I also, like I didn't tell my husband at the time or other family members. I couldn't discuss it with my dad. I was very isolated and guarded,
And
pretty much.
did any of like these experiences, did they say anything to you that's like significant
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
like can you say anything that they said to you that's significant like to your life or to how we all should be living or anything like that?
No, it wasn't like, I basically got when I had my death experience and saw my life review, I got the message, you don't screw up or trample anybody else. Don't
Yeah,
trample anybody else because it's wrong. And if you don't want to, feel their anguish later. Um,
right.
it didn't make me, I still made I'm still human. I still kept making mistakes through
Of
the rest
course,
of my life.
of
We're
course.
not, you can know all the right things to do and still, manage to screw it up. But
Yeah.
what happened was one night I went to sleep and I had these lucid dreams and I dreamt my first novel, literally,
Hmm.
and then got some encouragement and started writing, and it was able to absolutely talk about all these things that had happened to me, all the psychic experiences that I've had, all the premonitions and the things like that, and put it into characters. And it was very cathartic to write three novels, explain reincarnation, and go step by step by near death experience, and write in vivid detail. And that was a gift I brought back, that I could do that. And I got encouragement to do that. So that was really, really wonderful. But still, I didn't talk about it till I got over 50 and realized, how could I, I've got nothing to lose. I might as well come clean and just tell people about my near death experience. And I'm tell my truth, maybe it could help one person because I was so alone and anguished and and isolated when I had my experience. So I've gotten
Right.
some positive feedback.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Well, tell the people where they can get your books, because I know, like, I know I want to hear more just from just from this story here.
Okay. Well, my books are set in the horse world in 1979. There's an event that happens, and it brings all these people together, these patients who had near death experiences, to solve a mystery. And it's called the Near Death Saga. The first book is Near Death Connection. The second book is Throwaway Horses. The third is Reincarnation. And the fourth book is getting written as we speak.
Oh wow, so it's
But you
not
can
over. Okay.
You can get them on Amazon. Near Death Connection. I think it's easier if you start with the first book. It's on Kindle. It's on a paperback. Kindle's very reasonably priced for $3.99. And then you can go to Apple and you get the audiobook for Near Death Connection by Lura Ketchledge.
Gotcha.
And
And what?
I write for women. I really write for women. We've got some strong heroines in there and good description. And the feedback I've gotten is when I've explained the near death experience, people have said to me, written to me that, oh my God, I felt like I was there having it with the character because it's
Mm,
so detailed and the explanations vivid.
gotcha. So where can people just find you, get in contact with you? Of course, I'm gonna have the information in our descriptions as well. I don't know whether you do appearances or anything like that, but definitely
Well,
shout
I've
everything
been
out
on
like that.
reality television. I did my ghost story caught on camera, and I've done paranormal witness. I do interviews about near death experience on podcasts, and I have my own podcast, Near Death TV, where I interview
Gotcha.
um, very famous people that have had near death experiences, like Raymond Moody, and trying to get the word out because I want people to not be stigmatized if you've had an NDE. You're not crazy. It's a factual thing, and it's a natural thing. It's been written in history for thousands of years. It's not a new phenomena. Um, so I just had so much anguish being alone and struggling, coming to grips with it. That's why I do the shows. If one person, after all the shows I've done, one person doesn't feel isolated after their near death experience, then it's worth it. I mean, it's kind of like embarrassing to say, oh, I've seen my dead so and so, relative. People think you're crazy. Um, it's more common than you realize. People are being resuscitated in record numbers by modern medicine that have never happened throughout history.
Yeah.
That is why it's talked about.
Are you aware? Have you heard of the Great Awakening or the Great Shift? that this time was is supposed to be happening here?
I don't believe in it.
No. Okay. Okay.
I'm a
Yeah.
real hard sell about a lot of stuff. I'm a real hard.
That's how I know that
Yeah.
the near death experience was like that was real for you, because you're like everything else is like nah, but that, yeah, yeah,
Oh my, oh Lordy, you should have seen me the day after. I was like, going, oh my God. I was like, how could this be true? Everything they told me about there wasn't, I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I had a little hard time with it. My late sister she used to make fun of me. She used to really tease me. She just said I was the least likely person to believe in an NDE.
yeah,
From your
yeah,
high school, yeah, I was like the hardest sell out there. I mean, I love a good ghost story. I like a good zombie movie. I like horror stuff. I like Stephen
yeah,
King. But, that's entertainment. Reality and realizing that this is the truth, I just wasn't prepared for it, you know? I
right,
mean, it comforts me now. I'm 65. I've
yeah,
had autoimmune disease all my adult life and been in
mm,
and out of hospitals. I've had a strength because I know that there's something more that has let me let go of fear and let me persevere. I
yeah.
feel grateful to be alive. When I wake up in the morning, thanks for one more day. Um, Wish I didn't have medical bills, but other than that, I'm happy.
That's the way to go. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Laura. I really enjoyed your story and your time. Like I said, I'll definitely have
Thank
all
you.
the information in the description. And yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much. My name is E, and
Thank
this
you.
is Vision Rebirth. And cut.